the name of a play, a satire written by Voltaire. Candide ou l'optimisme. I think that'll have to do. What's the oo in there? Or did I just slip in an oo? Maybe there wasn't supposed to be an oo in there. Only the French would do that, wouldn't they? Make it that difficult, slip in an oo. Anyway, the oo is there, I think. It's a satire written by Voltaire in 1759. Now, many of you will know that Voltaire was a brilliant philosopher during the Age of Enlightenment. He said, every man is guilty of all the good he did not do. Superb. Every man and woman, I add, basically, is guilty of all the good he or she did not do. Judge a man by his questions rather than by his answers. That's an interesting one. Judge him by his, well, I suppose it gives you an insight into what somebody is seeking, rather than mansplaining everything to people. Optimism, this is his view as well. Optimism is the madness of insisting that all is well when we are miserable. Voltaire. And it's interesting because after 9/11, Woody Allen was asked, how did he feel? And he said, well, I'm miserable every day, so I really don't feel an awful lot different. So I wonder, had Voltaire a touch of the Woody Allens? But it's interesting after he says he's not a friend of optimism. Optimism in its most simple form is a belief that we can make things better. In Candide, Voltaire uses the phrase, all is for the best, and the best is of all possible worlds. Now, when he uses that, he's not using it in complimentary form. When he made this statement, he was mocking the optimistic philosophy of the German thinker Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Because you see, Leibniz stated, Leibniz was a Christian gentleman in Voltaire's Candide. He created this Christian gentleman, Leibniz. And Leibniz stated, sorry, I'm misleading you. No, it's another different character. Leibniz was a German philosopher. And he stated that God is omnipotent and basically all-powerful. And all good that must follow, then he created the best possible world. So if God is all-powerful, then he created the best of everything, and that was his sense of optimism. So our friend Voltaire is poking fun at Leibniz in his play, Candide. And at this, when he writes, all for the best is the best of all possible worlds. However, it's not unreasonable, in my view, it's not unreasonable for Leibniz to make a statement about the perfection of the world we live in. And that's because of his Christian belief. He would have pursued the following from Genesis 1:31. God saw all that he made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning. God saw all that he made, and it was very good. So our friend Leibniz, on reading this, would have seen it was the best of all possible worlds. But also, to be fair to Voltaire, he was horrified by the terrible earthquake of 1755, which practically destroyed the city of Lisbon in Portugal and caused the loss of 40,000 lives in Portugal, in Lisbon, and 10,000 across the sea in North Africa. So he was depressed by all that. He was depressed by such disasters. So he wondered, in a world that throws these things at us, how could anybody be optimistic? And so in Candide, he created the character Dr. Pangloss. Voltaire created this character, Dr. Pangloss. And he made, in the play, in the satire, he made Pangloss as a devotee of Leibniz, because it was him he really wanted to poke fun at. He of eternal optimism. Voltaire puts the following words in Pangloss's mouth, which he continues to repeat. Everything happens for a reason. So throughout the satire, throughout the Pangloss continuously repeats, everything happens for a reason. So even though Pangloss in the play suffers plague, syphilis, torture, and shipwreck, he still profoundly protests, everything is for a reason. Now, briefly, the shipwreck reminded me of Shackleton, who I spoke about last week, and his historic shipwreck with endurance and his journey and the optimism of his journey. However, Voltaire despised such optimism, especially when encouraged by ideas of divine perfection. Nothing upset him more, in my opinion, than when people were optimistic for religious reasons and because they believed that we lived in a perfect world created by a perfect God. This is what really drove him crazy, and why he partially wrote Candide and put Pangloss in as a character mouthing this great optimism. His answer was to take action in our own lives. Take action in our own lives and stop depending on this alleged force outside us called the perfect God. I just wonder, I'm not a great devotee of Voltaire. I can't say I've read too much of him. But I wonder, and this is a bit cheeky in a way, did he have a limited understanding of the learned virtue and motivation of optimism? Did he have a limited understanding of that? Like, it's obvious to me that much later, when Shackleton came on the scene, he understood and practiced such discipline in order to create himself as an optimistic person, and not necessarily only because of any significant religious belief. Did Voltaire maybe not spot that at his time? And one such person who shared some of Shackleton's optimism was surprisingly Vincent van Gogh. Now, of course, Vincent lived before Shackleton. In a letter he wrote in 1883, he stated the following: "Evil often seems to surpass good, but then there comes at last an end to the bitter frost. One morning the wind turns and there is thaw, and so I must still have hope." And I love the way Vincent ties hope into a vision to be optimistic. And I also understand in many of his letters he spoke optimistically, or at least wrote optimistically. And Vincent van Gogh's optimism was not a naive denial of suffering, but rather a defiant, active perseverance against the worst. Remember, Vincent suffered from mental health. He suffered poverty. He even felt himself, he failed to get recognition. But this did not stop him always creating and trusting in his own life's journey, continuously working. Could he have been known as Stoic? Maybe there was an aspect of Vincent that would link him to the concept of Stoicism. Stoicism taught us that we cannot control external events, but we can completely control how we respond to them. That's probably the key. We cannot control external events, but we can control how we respond to them. Vincent seemed to know that. Shackleton definitely knew it. And maybe Voltaire should have known it even after the horror of the earthquake in Lisbon. And to achieve this, the Stoics would tell us, we apply wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. That's not that easy. And in a world that we live in today, filled with anger, filled with despair in many quarters, and potentially on the edge, or maybe even in a third world war, people find it difficult to be optimistic. But we can control how we respond to all events. Such is the way of the Stoics. We need, in this age, we need to be blessed with stoicism and optimism in our much troubled world at this very strange time. Amen.